Today on Locked On Red Wings, what kind of expectations should we have for the preseason and what can we take away?
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts, whether that be here on YouTube, if you're watching on YouTube, that is, or listening on Spotify, Apple. I just assumed YouTube because I'm staring at you through the screen. So obviously we see the YouTube feed at all times.
Here on YouTube, well, I guess this same thing goes to every platform, but
yeah, but you can understand why I made that error. We're approaching today's episode with grace. Scotty, going to talk about the preseason again today because obviously the preseason is going on. We had our first game yesterday, and we kind of wanted to piggyback off of that conversation that we had and talk about what reasonable expectations should be for the preseason. Because obviously we saw a lot of good yesterday from all the Red Wings' best prospects who played in that game, playing against all of Chicago's best prospects. But at the same time, with that recognition that is a preseason game and that a lot of these players aren't going to make the team, we wanted to kind of talk about we wanted to set what we thought were maybe reasonable expectations for the preseason. We'll talk about lines at practice on Wednesday, as well as previewing the game against the Sabres, the second preseason game that happens tonight by the time you're listening to this. But before we get to any of that, Scotty, got to let you guys know, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app right now by visiting FanDuel.com and win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. All right, Scotty, talking about reasonable expectations for the preseason, things that we are hoping and expecting to see get accomplished, basically. What do you think is number one on your mind when thinking about preseason expectations?
Undefeated or bust.
If we lose a single game,
if we lose a single preseason game, Eisman should be fired. McClellan should be canned, and they should trade everyone. Okay, I demand perfection over these next 5 or 6 games. No, I mean, I think that it's important to reiterate, and we say this every year, I feel like, preseason expectations for us are going to be based on positional groups looking a certain way or how players mesh with other players or individual performances even. I could not actually care any less about wins and losses in the preseason. And I think that that's something that's at least important to reiterate because, again, some people get, I mean, the goal is to win, obviously, but who knows who your competition is going to be every night? It's inconsistent. Who knows who's going to be on your roster every night, etc. So I think the place I want to start is something that's been a huge conversation topic for us all summer and will continue to be until proven otherwise. Is I think it would be really cool if we went into opening night with some sort of confidence in who the top line left wing was. I think that would be super cool, right? Like, it's not necessarily a necessity. It's not a need. Like the Wings, it's not like, if they don't have it figured out by opening night or after the end of the preseason, then, this season's going to be a disaster or whatever. No, they can figure it out on the fly if need be, but I think it would be a huge luxury and a huge plus if that picture was clear by the end of the preseason.
You said a really important word there, and I think that word was luxury. In that, I think it would be a luxury for this team to get that figured out because I'm just not confident that they'll find the guy, so to speak, to play on that top line. I think they'll have a guy to start with at the start of the season, and they'll play that until he proves otherwise incapable, and then they'll switch to another guy. I do think that it's going to be a rotation throughout the season of whoever is playing as the hot hand for that line at that minute, but I like the way you framed it as it would be a luxury to find that guy. And right now, it's Emmett Finney. Emmett Finney is still a long way from making this roster.
Dang
Like,
right.
let's make it clear. He is playing incredible right now, but he is still a 7th-round pick who was drafted 2 seasons ago, who is making waves, don't get me wrong, and every single day, Todd McClellan talked a little bit about it in postgame yesterday, like Alex Laferriere when he was in LA. They just keep their foot on the gas every single day, and next thing you know, they've managed to stick around, and it's December. So, like, Emmett Finney has to continue to do this day in and day out to earn his spot on the roster. But if it's not him, it could be Elmer Soderblom. It could be James Van Riemsdyk. Like, there's also a possibility Emmett Finney during practice is holding down that spot for James Van Riemsdyk, waiting for him to come back, for him to get a tryout there. Who else could it be? It could be Jonathan Berggren, Nate Danielson, Marco Kasper, Andrew Kopp. Like, there's a lot of guys out there who are an option. But I do agree with you. Like, it would be really nice to get a guy who seems to fit in that role. But even Dylan Larkin himself, in the media availability after practice on Wednesday, said that there might not be a guy. Like, they might not ever find that guy. And that was definitely him, like, tempering expectations. I have a hard time believing Larkin's just like, yeah, we'll never have a left wing in the rest of my life.
Well, I
think he was just trying to get the point across that, like, they might not find it this season. And I think that is a firm reality, but I agree with you. It would be a really nice luxury to have that figured out by the start of the season, at least for, like, I don't know, a month to get, not be testing it every game.
Right. I also think that there's a big difference between, I don't know, I didn't take that comment as, like, anything, really. I mean, that doesn't mean that the line's not going to be productive and they're not going to find people to fill in that void and again, like, feed off of the other 2 great players on that line and for it to be a productive group. It just might not have an everyday player there, like a Sharpied in guy there going into every night. That's all. And that might not happen at all. But if it was something, it'll obviously be a big storyline in the preseason. And if we're confident in who that is going into opening night, I think that's a win.
Yeah, and I think another thing for me personally, and this again is going to be a luxury statement, right? I would love if 1 to 2 of these rookies find their way onto the roster. I think there is spot definitively for one guy. If a second guy could crack this roster, I think that would be huge for this internal growth of this team because, again, when we talk about the Red Wings and a possible playoff push, at this point it has to come via internal growth. Obviously, that means Raymond and Seider continuing to grow, Edvinsson and Kasper. But if you can get a couple young guys to make this team and have impact, that would be huge. I still believe the front runners for that are Carter Mazur. We've talked about on end just because of the type of role he's going to be asked to play, a bottom 6, heavy checking forward type role into the corners. Or Nate Danielson, who looks NHL ready. It's just a question about justification of minutes. Right? I think those are your 2 leading candidates. I think they both looked really good in preseason game number 1 and have looked good from what I've read through training camp. But Emmett Finney, the guy we mentioned just a couple minutes ago, Scotty, again, he has to continue to do what he does for the next however many preseason games he's given. He's not going to play every night, right? Because they're going to try different groups out. But in every game that he's going to play, he's going to have to continue to turn heads for him to be a serious contender to make the team. But as of thus far, he's done nothing short of that. So if 1 or 2 rookies can make this team, I think that would be a phenomenal boon for the Red Wings internal growth and push to make the playoffs.
For sure. And I also think when it comes to, I mean, we kind of talked about this a little bit yesterday, but the, dichotomy of just what roles are assumed for a lot of those young guys as well. I mean, with somebody like Mazur, I think that would be a big addition to the bottom 4 because you're assuming that the ceiling for a guy like Mazur is higher than the ceiling for a guy like Watson or, really any of those kind of revolving door guys at the bottom of the roster. So I think that would be obviously big from that regard, but I think at least the hope is that if that does happen, that the ceiling of what this team could accomplish raises a little bit. The reason why you don't just do it and don't even think about it is because young players also have lower floors, and you want to make sure that they're A, developed properly, but B, that they're not going to, actively cost you with their minutes as well. So we'll see, but I think that that's a great point. I mean, all eyes are going to be on obviously Finney, but on top of that, Danielson and Mazur really for a lot of the preseason for that exact reason.
Yes, a little bit of a departure here from what we were just talking about, because our next topic is going to be obviously lines at practice. Once we get beyond the preseason expectations, we got a couple more expectations we want to give to you guys. But scrolling on Sarkon's Twitter page, because he provided the lines from practice, and he showed off that the Red Wings were breaking in their Centennial gear today. All the Red Wings were wearing their Centennial socks, their Centennial pants covers. Gibson rocking all brown pads, and I think we were talking about on the podcast a couple weeks ago, probably last week, that it would be sick if a goalie rocked all brown pads to go with the red and cream color, and it looks like Gibson's going to do that. That's going to look sick when we see it in full gear.
That's going to be awesome.
Sorry for the tangent. I noticed that as I was scrolling.
No, I love
it. It'd be sick. Scotty, let's take a quick break. When we return, we'll talk about a couple other preseason expectations, or maybe expectations isn't the right word to say, hopes to see. So stay tuned to segment 2 of Locked On Red Wings. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your first bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. You're going to love using FanDuel because it fits however you like to bet, player props, building a same-game parlay, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye out for a fantasy lineup. It's quick, easy, and the best way to add a little bit more energy to your Sundays. So, are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet.
What are you doing?
I'm leaving that in. I'm leaving that in.
What's happening, dude?
So, a little peek behind the curtain. Obviously, all our little video clips for transitions are all right next to each other. When you hover over the video clip, you get like the little 3 dots that are your options. I initially clicked on the 3 dots instead of the video itself, which would have played the transition. And so, like, when that happened, there was that awkward pause, and I panicked, and like my mouse moved, and I accidentally clicked the intro for a second there. So, as many people saw,
0 for 2 there.
Yeah, I hiked the ball 20 feet in the air behind me above my first baseman, essentially, is what just happened.
Super necessary, yeah.
Yeah. Scotty, what else do you have for things you'd like to see from the preseason, things you'd like to see accomplished?
For sure. Well, this one almost goes without saying. We don't have to break it down into a big conversation because it's just a passing thing. But obviously, I think one of, if not the biggest goals of the preseason is just to get through it healthy. You guys got to ramp up. You got to be ready for game 1, right? Game 1 counts the same as game 82. You got to be ready to roll. But at the same time, you don't want to hurt anyone in a game that ultimately doesn't matter. So I think that's kind of again, a really easy one that everyone says kind of every single preseason, but that's just
right.
One that I wanted to point out again. I think another one that we've talked about all summer that will certainly continue carrying on into probably the regular season is I am very interested to see the different combinations that are put on the third pair. And I think that's another, maybe not hardcore necessity, but it would be really nice to be confident in our third pair going into the start of the season.
Confident as in confident in knowing who's going to go out there, or confident in the performance they're going to give us?
Confident in the sense that confident in knowing that the 6 best defensemen are going to be dressed on opening night and that anybody who's not one of those 6 guys will not be. Yeah.
And so you look at your options, right? And it's a plethora of players who are third pair defensemen. You have Justin Holl, Eric Gustafsson, Travis Hamonic, Jacob Bernard Docker, William Lagesson, Ian Mitchell, William Wallinder, and Shai Buyam. I think the most exciting guys to make their roster would be William Wallinder or Shai Buyam. I've liked a lot of what I've seen out of both of those guys since training camps began in the red and white game, and of course in the prospects game, and now preseason. Those two guys were both second-round picks. Wallinder was pick 32. Literally, at the time, was one pick away from being a first-round draft pick. A lot of people had him projected there. Both of them are big defensemen who are pretty good at moving the puck. I would love to see one of those two guys suit up, but I also understand realistically, you don't have Justin Holl, Eric Gustafsson, Travis Hamonic, JBD, and William Lagesson, and Ian Mitchell if you're expecting one or both of those guys to make the team. Now, granted, again, if they work their way onto the team, they work their way onto the team, and they'll make it work. They'll figure it out, right? Like Travis Hamonic could be placed on waivers, sent down to the minors, and his entire $1 million salary is off the books. Like, it's not that big a deal. If one of those guys earns that roster spot, they earn that roster spot. But just again, like, you don't sign all those guys if you're expecting those guys to make the leap out of training camp. So that really brings you down to Holl, Gustafsson, Hamonic, and JBD, and with Simon Edvinsson currently working his way back from a injury, Hamonic's been slotted on the second pair with Albert Johansson, and you've had a little preview of the lines. You've had Gustafsson and Holt together as recently as on Wednesday. So Ian Mitchell was with Bernard Docker. So I struggle to be confident with any of those guys.
I didn't mean confident in terms of like.
But we have a set pair, is what you mean. We're not cycling through guys. I agree. That's important.
I want it to be a similar, I guess, conversation or wording rather to the top line. I just want it to be clear. Like, okay, these are clearly the best option we have, even if that is not, the best thing.
You want somebody to step up and step above to clearly indicate I'm better than the rest of these other bottom pair defensemen, which I agree would be huge. Because what we're looking at on paper isn't very inspiring. I really want to see what it looks like when Edvinsson comes back. Because obviously Edvinsson is going to be playing either on the top or the second pair. If they move him on the top pair, what does that mean for Sherratt and Johansson? Because do they get paired up as your second pair? Johansson back to his offside? Right. The trickle down could be phenomenal for at least those top two. But then you just then you add another body to that bottom pair again. It's gonna be definitely one of the more intriguing storylines to watch. I think PK group's another one. I want to see the PK group kind of get solidified. I want to see the PKs have success also in the preseason. They went 3 for 4 yesterday on the penalty kill, only allowing one goal, and the one goal they allowed was Connor Bedard. That yesterday being Tuesday because we're recording this on Wednesday. I want to see more of that. They had a couple of really good penalty kills where Chicago didn't get anything really going. Again, Chicago's B team against Detroit's B team. But to build off of something, and Todd McClellan spoke about that a little bit during the media availability after the game or after one of the practices. There's been a lot of Todd McClellan media availability the last few days where they spoke about the penalty kill, and he basically said, no, the penalty kill has to get better. Like if we want to go where we want to go, the penalty kill has to improve. And it was hard last season because the penalty kill had changed before Lalonde got, removed. They tried to change it and it didn't work. And then here comes Todd McClellan coming in and he has a different plan. So he said a lot of what was hurting the penalty kill last season, Scotty, was the fact that they kept changing it throughout the year. The players never got comfortable in one system because it got changed at least once under Lalonde and then a couple times under Todd McClellan because they kept trying to find something that worked. Players never really had time to find a groove. So that's why training camp and preseason is so crucial for systems install. Because you could install your PK and hope that if it works, you don't have to really mess with it too much. You just tweak it here and there.
Right. And part of that is going to be personnel too, right? I mean, obviously, system and X's and O's is something that we're hoping has some sort of a maybe overhaul is too dramatic, but shows I would like to see something different than one of the worst penalty kills I've literally ever seen in my entire life last year. So I think that would be a start, and we'll obviously keep an eye on that and see what they're running and if it's effective, etc. But I think that the groupings are really interesting to me too, because we talked about it so much, but the penalty kill from 2 years ago was middle of the pack, and the penalty kill last year was one of the worst things my eyes have ever looked at, and yet it wasn't that different of personnel, right? It was largely the same players. And so I'm interested to see if they are going to lean more into, again, maybe system and like X's and O's formation, whatever you want to call it, or if they're going to do, we're just going to throw some different names out there and see what sticks.
Right.
It's probably a little bit of both, I would imagine, but that'll be certainly something we keep an eye out for, because we're looking to not have a penalty kill under 70%.
Scotty, let's head to a second break, head to segment 3. And when we return, we will preview the game against the Buffalo Sabres. Stay tuned to Locked On Red Wings. All right, Scotty, when it comes to preseason previews, it's really hard to talk about the game because we're not really sure on what squads we will see. Yesterday, let me rephrase that. Monday, rather, we got a bunch of lines at practice. Tuesday, actually. No, it's Tuesday. I don't know what my day is, man. When you're recording for the day in advance, it messes with you whether or not you're talking yesterday, today.
Right.
When lines at practice came out before the game on Tuesday, it was largely the starting group, like your normal roster for the most part. A lot of people thought, oh, it's a home game. We'll see most of the regulars, because that's what a lot of teams do. So if it's a preseason home game, you play your regulars. On the road, you play your prospects. So the fans have something to look forward to. Of course, 5 first-round picks. That was still something to look forward to if you were a Red Wings fan. That was fun. But the practices at lines at practices on Wednesday, struggling here in segment 3, were Raymond Larkin and Emmett Finney, Marco Kasper, Patrick Kane, Alex DeBrincat, Andrew Kopp, Mason Appleton, Michael Rasmussen, JT Compher, Jonathan Berggren, and Elmer Soderblom. And then on defense, you had Ben Sherratt, Seider, Johansson, Hamonic, Gustafson, Hull, Ian Mitchell, and Bernard Docker as your fourth pair that was rotating in, and Edvinsson and Van Riemsdyk obviously still out. Those were the lines that were part of the regular group. So those are what you're looking at as your projected NHL lines. Now, whether or not these are the guys that play tonight are completely different. That's a different situation. But if they do, it kind of gives us a peek at what we could see at the regular season, because a lot of these are the same groups that we've seen all throughout training camp. And obviously, Todd McLellan has cautioned us as Red Wings fans to not read too much into lines at training camp, into lines during the preseason, because they could change. But they've been largely consistent. And I just want to know, Scotty, what your thoughts are on these line makeups going into tonight's game, if these are the lines we see.
Yeah, the only thing that really jumps out at me is, and it's going to jump out at me every preseason game, is where Elmer's slotted in. Not that it's a bad thing either. I think that it's just a testament to the amount of variance that we could see from him. Like, this is a guy that ultimately still could end up being a bottom 6, again, like big-bodied bottom 6 type of forward that is valuable to your team, but isn't going to produce a lot of points and is going to be more in that role. And he also is one of the 3 or 4 favorites on the roster to be a top line winger this year. So like, that is, I think, going to be really interesting to watch, is how does he mesh with the bottom 6 guys when he plays with them? And how does he mesh with Dylan Larkin and Lucas Raymond when he plays with them? And it's just going to be interesting to see how that kind of shuffles out. But I think that that's probably one of the bigger things that jumped out at me right away.
I mean, you look at that fourth line, too. It's actually a fourth line with offensive upside. You got offensive skill forward, Jonathan Berggren, and then you have offensive skill forward that is also a giant in Elmer Soderblom, and then you have a solid two-way center in JT Compher, who's coming off a bad year, but he's playing fourth-line minutes, so competition is going to be fairly light. Like, that's a fourth line that could, if you're looking for depth scoring, it could provide depth scoring. Obviously, as a fan of the youth, I would love to see, Mazer sneak in onto that fourth line as part of the regular group. That remains to be seen. But that fourth line is sneaky good. And then, of course, you have your matchup line, even though, again, Todd McClown cautioned us about calling a line a matchup line because it's hard to get true matchups in the NHL these days. But Andrew Kopp, Mason Appleton, Michael Rasmussen, I mean, that is a defense-heavy line. That is a heavy, heavy line. Like, that's three guys who are not afraid to throw the body. Andrew Kopp, Mason Appleton, Michael Rasmussen, all three are heavy forecheckers, get into the corners.
Edvinsson out there with that line as well.
I mean, that's a line that is designed to wear you down. Wear down your opponent and maybe provide a little bit of offense so that your top two lines can get back out there. Or maybe even your fourth line in limited minutes can go out there and provide offense. So I like the makeup of these forward groups right now. I just would love to see a Nate Danielson or Carter Mazer break their way in there. We'll see.
For sure,
defensively, I don't take too much away from it because Simon Edvinsson is still out. Obviously, JVR is still out too, and Van Riemsdyk probably I think will fill in for Emmett Finney's spot once he comes back. At least get a trial run at top line wing. Will remain to be seen how that pans out. But with Edvinsson out, it's hard to make anything out of the defensive pairs because it could completely change what the pairs look like when he comes back.
Yeah, for sure. The offense is definitely the thing to focus on there. I like the makeup of the lines as it stands right now. And obviously, injuries will happen. Players will underperform. Players will overperform. There's obviously a lot of nuance and variance that will occur still throughout the year. But as it stands right now, I don't know. I think the depth that we have been asking for, assuming health, is probably there to an extent. It's just a matter of A, to what extent, and B, is that how it's going to look the entire season?
Right. And I think that there is a possibility these are the lines we see tomorrow because Ansar Khan on social media pointed out there was one other line that practiced with this group. It was Dominic Shine, Nate Danielson, and Austin Watson. So kind of your up-and-coming young prospect with two fringe NHL guys. So being part of that group is still a huge thing for Nate Danielson. And the rest of the players skated after them with the Wings hosting the Sabres, obviously, tonight at 7 o'clock. So with this being the main group, the first group on the ice and then the first group off the ice, maybe we'll see them. But again, yesterday, the rest, it was the other way around where the players we thought we were going to see ended up being not being the players we ended up seeing. We ended up seeing all the prospects. So it's hard to know for sure, but these are the lines that we were given out of practice on Wednesday, and I would love to see these guys in action against the Sabres. Scotty, got any final thoughts?
I don't think so, man. We ball.
We do ball. I got to get out of here. I'm tripping over my words like crazy here in segment 3. It's been a rough segment. It's crazy, too, because I'm making a effort to speak slower this episode in an effort to not stumble over my words and to be clearer with what I say, and I'm stumbling over my words more, almost.
I think you sounded great. I still said I think about 15 times, so we're both working on stuff.
I don't think that I heard you say I think.
See, but that just means that I say it so much that you tune it out, and that might be worse.
It's also possible I just tune you out in general.
You should do that. I think that's I would if I could.
Okay. We'll be back with a new episode tomorrow. Same time, same place. Your team every day.